Debuting in February of 1940, Professor Hugo Strange became one of the earliest recurring villains in Batman's Rogues Gallery, a cunning strategist, scientific mastermind, and let's not forget, deranged lunatic. He was also one of the first villains to uncover Batman's true identity. The storyline in which this occurred is the one I wanted to primarily take a look at this week. It spanned issues number 469 to 479 of Detective Comics from early 1977 until late 1978. Most of the issues were written by Steve Englehart and penciled by Marshall Roberts, except for the first two drawn by Walt Simonson and the last two written by Len Wein. Detective Comics number 469 to 479 in the years since their publication have gone by the name of Strange Apparitions. They're considered a cult classic by many Bat fans, but collectively are a story arc in the loosest possible sense of the term. They feel like a partial story in a lot of ways, lacking a definitive resolution, and that's not the fault of their creators. They were never intended to be repackaged as their own self-contained story. They kind of just were, due to the positive reception the comics had received. That, and there is a smaller, singular plot thread laced throughout them pertaining to the ghost of Hugo Strange, but I will be expanding on that later for contextual purposes, looking at more of the narrative surrounding Strange's death, phantom form, and what ultimately came of it all into the mid-1980s, concluding with the 10th Batman Annual. Before I get into the meat and taties of everything, Strange Apparitions accomplished quite a bit in regards to Batman's mythology. It reintroduced two Golden Age rogues long since forgotten about. We'll get into Hugo Strange, but the other that was brought back into the fold was Deadshot. His one and only appearance prior to this was in Batman 59 from June of 1950. Floyd Lawton was a far cry from what we know the character as today. He was a wealthy man who wore a tuxedo, top hat, and domino mask, who used his expert marksmanship to become a vigilante that disarmed criminals and didn't kill them, discrediting the Caped Crusader. During the events of Strange Apparitions, Deadshot was brilliantly reinvented by Englehart and Roberts. He went from being a wealthy man with too much time on his hands to a deadly assassin who had rotted inside a prison cell for years, given a whole new outlook on life, believing there were no rules, only opportunities. Roberts' iconic design for the character is what he has had ever since, with the wrist-mounted guns, red suit and armor, and silver precision-aiming mask. Deadshot is further proof that all it takes is one story to refresh an idea, one that could have been lost to the annals of time forever. Thanks Strange Apparitions for ensuring Deadshot is still around today for us to enjoy. Strange Apparitions also introduced a few new villains for Batman to play around with: Dr. Phosphorus, crime boss Rupert Thorne, and Clayface 3, all of whom I will go into more detail on soon. It debuted a new love interest for Bruce Wayne, one he seriously pursued and contemplated for the first time really, sharing the other half of his life with, named Silver St. Cloud. He even suspects that she may know his secret, piecing the clues together by herself. The stuff with Silver St. Cloud in this comic may or may not have inspired the characterization of Vicky Vale in the 1989 Tim Burton movie. Anywho, after a long night on patrol, Batman returns to his apartment at the Wayne Foundation penthouse. At this point in the comics, the late 1960s into the early 80s, Bruce Wayne had stopped living at his family's estate, feeling it was too impractical to live that far out of Gotham, especially after his ward, Dick Grayson, had left to go to college. Bruce was all alone without his Dick. The main reason for the move was because Bruce wanted to be closer to the action in the city, but it was also another way for DC Comics to revitalize Batman a little for younger audiences of the time, not have him be this depressed hermit held up in an old mansion on the hill. Don't worry though, he still had a Batcave beneath the penthouse, built in a partially dug subway tunnel abandoned when World War II broke out, accessible through a hidden elevator, and that had a Batmobile entrance through a nearby warehouse located in the dead end of Finger Alley, named of course after Batman's co-creator. Batman would find Alfred collapsed in the apartment and tries to call an ambulance for him, but all of them in the city are being used. He takes Alfred to Gotham General himself and learns that hundreds of similar cases have been popping up all over the city. A letter is sent directly to Commissioner Gordon's office from a Dr. Phosphorus, who claims responsibility for the radioactive epidemic on their hands. Phosphorus wants revenge against Gotham and all of its inhabitants for ruining his life. Having deduced that the mysterious disease is coming from the water, Batman goes to the Gotham Reservoir and encounters Phosphorus, who has been soaking his body in it. Dr. Phosphorus is X-ray-like in appearance, with glowing yellowish-green skin, the result of a nuclear plant meltdown, which transformed its benefactor, Alex Sartorius, when he was struck with chunks of heavily irradiated sand he hid behind to unsuccessfully avoid the blast. Now he forever burns, releasing toxic fumes out of his body. He was the inspiration for the heavily underutilized Batman Beyond villain Blight, who I swear was only taken out of that show because the Warner execs thought the corporate stuff wasn't kid-friendly enough. Bastards. Batman tries his best to battle Dr. Phosphorus, but every part of his body that comes in contact with him suffers nasty, superficial burns. The Dark Knight would wrap his fists with the charred pieces of his cape to get a few good shots in. He gets tackled by the villain, and the two plunge into the river, which Batman actually enjoys because it helps cool off his injuries, momentarily. When they exit the river, Dr. Phosphorus flees, and says he will have to fight Batman another day. Sartorius had been a member of a tobacconist club, whose chairman is the crime boss and underhandedly elected city council chairman Rupert Thorne, who has all of the courts in his back pocket. Thorne had helped Sartorius build his nuclear plant off the coast, but Sartorius lost his fortune pumping money into the plant's construction. After being mutated by its radiation, he would blackmail the city council to get rid of Batman, or he would take it upon himself to track down and kill each and every one of them. Intimidated, Thorne would be forced to slap a subpoena on Batman. His vigilantism would be outlawed in the city, something the Caped Crusader would have to navigate around for quite a while after this. Dr. Phosphorus would attack a concert happening at Gotham Memorial Arena, using its laser technology to project his face above the crowd. He tells them the building has been sealed and they will all be dead within 3 minutes from his body's radioactive fumes. Soon after, Batman would get a call on the Red Hotline from Chief O'Hara, who tells him about the concert being attacked and that all those in attendance have perished. He also informs him about the warrant out for his arrest, that the police will be gunning for him. In the Batcave, Batman's Geiger counter would go off, indicating the wounds he suffered in his fight with Phosphorus are emitting trace levels of radiation. Batman would go to the strongest source of radioactivity in the city, the nuclear plant off the coast. He finds it heavily guarded by Rupert Thorne's men. As he gazes down at all of the machinery and plans his next move, he is struck from behind by Dr. Phosphorus. Batman says he's wearing a radiation-resistant batsuit, though his chin is still exposed, so that defeats the whole purpose of the thing. dummy. Latching onto one of the steel beams to drain power from the nuclear reactor, Dr. Phosphorus inadvertently melts through it and falls into the heart of it, causing an unstable explosion which seemingly kills him. Spoiler, he doesn't come back for the rest of the story, but he's played his part. Even after a week following his dual encounters with Dr. Phosphorus, Bruce isn't at full strength. His burns are still radioactive and have not healed. He decides to book himself into a highly exclusive clinic for wealthy folk called Grey Towers near the Gotham Canal, phoning his main squeeze, Silver St. Cloud, about it and telling her that he'd be there to have some tests done. When Bruce arrives, he meets the Chief of Staff, Dr. Todhunter, and his main nurse, Magda. Bruce is taken to a private room and immediately told to go to sleep. The door is locked behind him, and he passes out from a drug that was inside Magda's perfume. He has a nightmare about his parents' death and his donning of the cape and cowl. Images of a snake and the Grim Reaper could also symbolize his radiation poisoning, or might be a little foreshadowing of what's to follow. Worried over how long her boyfriend's been gone, Silver goes to visit Bruce at the clinic he told her about. Dr. Todhunter is there to meet her and says Bruce isn't permitted any visitors due to his radiation poisoning. Bruce wakes up to find himself in his locked room with a guard stationed outside the door. Not finding any cameras, Bruce opens the briefcase he brought with him containing the batsuit and switches into it. He uses acid vials in his utility belt to eat through the steel bars of his window. After he climbs out, he discovers that the clinic has a larger outer wall surrounding it and concealing it from the rest of the city. On the clinic's roof, Batman is attacked by a couple of monster men, patients at the clinic mutated with a special growth hormone. After defeating them, he crashes into Dr. Todhunter's office and falsely claims to have been on his trail for weeks to prevent his identity of Bruce Wayne from being uncovered. Todhunter is left confused. He says if Batman truly was on his tail, is the world's greatest detective, then how does he not know his true identity? Dr. Todhunter rips off his artificial face to reveal himself as Professor Hugo Strange, who had been presumed dead following his fall off a cliff in Detective Comics number 46 way back in 1940. Professor Strange explains that he had left Gotham and had been in Europe all this time. He returned and started his Grey Tower scheme to lure in rich Gothamites to be mind-controlled and turned into his mutated puppet army. He does this by blackmailing some of his patients with temporary antidotes so they can be released back out into the city to convince their friends to visit the clinic, which is how Bruce learned of it. Batman easily disposes of the nutjob professor, however, is bitten by a venomous snake and goes unconscious. When he comes to, thanks to an antidote administered by Strange, he finds that his cowl has been removed and his identity exposed. Hugo is extremely competent here, not wasting an ounce of time to get that mask off. Love it. Alfred would then be captured and taken to Grey Towers, thrown inside the same cell Bruce is being kept alive in, though drugged out of his fucking mind. While Wayne is imprisoned at the clinic, Strange would revel in his victory, alter his voice, and disguise himself as both Bruce Wayne and Batman, embodying both aspects of his enemy's life. His goal is to steal millions from the Wayne Foundation by liquidating all of its assets into one lump sum he can collect. Silver would enter Bruce's office using a spare key he had given her, catching Strange off guard. To ensure she doesn't get in the way moving forward, he would use the opportunity to break Bruce's relationship off with her. Probably a good thing. Hugo wouldn't want her seeing him naked. The pieces won't match. Suspicious that something may be wrong with Bruce, that it might not even be Bruce, Silver does some digging, returning to Grey Towers. But she's turned away once more. Magda tells her that Bruce is no longer there. When Silver departs, Magda informs Hugo that she may be onto them. Silver calls up Dick Grayson at a payphone and tells him everything she knows about Bruce's sudden change in behavior. After hanging up, Silver is attacked by Magda and some monster men, and she would be taken to Gotham General. Dick would covertly return to Gotham as Robin to look for Bruce, and later breaks into Grey Towers to free him and Alfred. Professor Strange had accumulated over $7 million of the Wayne fortune in the span of a few short days. He's begun losing his marbles a little, talking to himself in his Bruce Wayne voice, but you can sense the utmost respect he still has for his enemy. He would auction Batman's secret identity to 3 criminals, shrouded in shadow, clearly Rupert Thorne, the Penguin, and the Joker. The entry bid is $10,000, which they all meet. The following night, the official bidding will begin at $1 million. He tells each of the criminals that they have been breathing in a unique chemical of his own design. It's harmless, but his sensors will kill anyone who doesn't expel it from their bodies tomorrow night, and then bids them adieu. Pretty unique threat coming from Strange there. After the meeting, Hugo is ambushed by Thorne and his thugs. Thorne doesn't want to wait to obtain the secret. He wants it now, goddammit, and will use violence to acquire it if need be. Strange is taken to City Hall and, in its basement, is beaten to death by Thorne's goons. Throughout the torture, he remains loyal to his enemy. He refuses to give Thorne Batman's treasured secret, feeling its knowledge that must be earned by besting the Dark Knight himself, not simply taken. For dying with the secret in such a headstrong way, Thorne believes Strange might be the Batman. Hugo's body would be stuffed in a barrel and thrown off a foggy pier by Thorne's men. Batman and Robin arrive to rough them up, and Batman interrogates one of them for answers as to who or what was inside of it. The police arrive, and the wanted heroes are forced to flee the scene. Following a meeting Thorne has with other members of his tobacconist club, he is haunted by a large apparition in the form of Hugo Strange's disembodied head that threatens his life. Thorne is the only club member that witnesses it and thinks he's going crazy. Later, Batman would visit the sleazy city council chairman at his home and intimidate him. He knows it was Thorne and his bad apples that pulled the necessary strings to make the cease and desist against him happen. After Batman leaves, Thorne sees another ghost of Strange. He reaches out to touch him, and his hand goes right through. Hugo says he must pay for his actions, and that when he confronts him a third time, that's when he'll die. I think Thorne may have to change his slacks. Deadshot would escape from prison and feels he has something to prove to Batman. He's bitter that he's become a forgotten rogue, whereas others like Scarecrow, Riddler, and Catwoman get more attention. Deadshot would try to snipe Batman from the top of the Ellsworth building, but misses. Deadshot's skills, strength, and newfound gadgets make him nearly equivalent to Batman. The comic goes out of its way to beef up Deadshot's threat level here. You know he's not playing games. The Dark Knight would overcome Deadshot in a convention hall after the villain is thrown into an enlarged typewriter, probably landed on the letter L for loser. As he runs across it, he actually strikes the letters D and C. Clever, right? Not really. Silver St. Cloud, whose company is arranging and providing security for the event, makes eye contact with Batman before the police arrive. She suspects he may be her love, Bruce Wayne. The next night, Batman would go to Silver's apartment and climb through her window when she's just in a towel. Boundaries, man. He asks her if she knew anything from the night prior when she stared at him. He's hoping she'll own up to knowing his identity. Silver plays dumb, mentions that she had never seen Deadshot before and that she doesn't have any more useful information for him. Batman apologizes for the intrusion. You better, you masher, you perv. After he makes his exit, Silver collapses to the floor. She feels guilty knowing Batman's secret, one that could destroy him. She figured out what no one else has in all these years, because as Bruce's girlfriend, she knows his jawline better than anyone else. That I take offense to. Does this comic think we're morons? Bruce Wayne is one of the most recognizable men in Gotham City, an eligible bachelor plastered on TV in numerous magazine covers. Surely a lot of women know that jawline, have seen that jawline in different ways. Having grown increasingly paranoid over his visions of the deceased Strange, Rupert Thorne would leave Gotham in a sedan, driving hundreds of miles out of the city. He picks up a stranded hitchhiker whose car had broken down. It's Silver. She had left the city to get some air away from Batman's watchful eye, and to think her relationship with Bruce over. The car is filled with silence for hours, with the minds of both travelers preoccupied. Thorne feels that if he has someone with him, though, he's safe from harm. The sequence oozes ambience. You can almost hear the rain hitting the windshield and the wiper blades moving back and forth. A news bulletin comes on the radio regarding the Batman and attacks made by the Joker. Thorne angrily shuts it off and tells Silver Gotham is better off without Batman. He's the cause of all its problems. She's in support of the masked hero, though, and she calls Thorne out on his sanctions against him. Thorne pulls over to the side of the road and kicks Silver to the curb. He continues driving, hoping there will be another hitchhiker soon. He sees one, but it turns out to be Hugo Strange's ghost that phases through the sedan's windshield and chokes Thorne in the driver's seat. Spooky. Detective Comics number 475 and 476 depict a legendary battle between Batman and the Joker, the inspiration for the classic Laughing Fish episode of Batman the Animated Series. It has the Clown Prince of Crime contaminating all of the fish on the eastern and western seaboards, altering their color and giving them fixed grins that look like his. He goes to the Copyright Commission to be given a cut of all fish sales in the United States, but is denied because a natural resource can't be copyrighted. He then goes after the copyright commissioners that work there one by one until they agree to his demands. After killing two of the commissioners throughout the night, in the early morning, Joker infiltrates the GCPD headquarters, where the third one is being held. He dresses as one of the cops and sprays at Batman with acid that comes out of his phony police badge. They fight outside onto the building's fire escape, with both men nearly falling a couple times. Silver had managed to hail a taxi back into town. She watches the terrifying encounter from the ground. Batman pursues the Joker across several rooftops. They enter a construction site and stand on top of a steel girder held by a cable. Batman jumps off of it to avoid more of Joker's acid, as the steel girder is struck by lightning. Joker plummets into the water below, and after not resurfacing for several minutes, Batman assumes he has, at long last, met his demise. Away from prying eyes, Silver confronts Batman. She finally tells him that she knows the truth. She respects what he does and loves him with every ounce of her being, but she knows that she can't live with the risks he must take as Batman. Reluctantly, she breaks up with him and tells him to never try and contact her again. She plants one final kiss on him, and the two go their separate ways. It's a powerful moment, one of the best between Batman and his numerous love interests he has had over the years. years. The chemistry between Bruce and Silver in this story was really strong, arguably the strongest he had had in the comics up to that point, and you wanted to see the relationship succeed, Bruce finally achieving that happiness he'd always desired. Losing Silver was very tough for Bruce. It would get in the way of his crime fighting. The bad guys acted like punching bags he could take his frustrations out on. Getting dumped by the love of your life and having to be Batman afterwards, that's a dangerous combination if there ever was one. While looking at a photo and note given to him by Silver at the Wayne Foundation, Bruce gazes up at the portrait of his parents and blames them for what happened. If they hadn't gotten themselves killed, he would have been able to live a normal life. Batman wouldn't have driven a wedge between him and Silver. Though Bruce does come to his senses and apologizes to his parents, he still contemplates giving up being Batman forever. I mentioned earlier that Clayface 3 debuts during the events of this storyline. He's the last villain Batman faces to quote-unquote close off Strange Apparitions. He's an intriguing character, a misunderstood man who turns into a monster. His name is Preston Payne, and he was born with a physical deformity. His body produced too much growth hormone, which caused him to have an enlarged head, hands, and feet. He was bullied, mistreated, had no friends, but was exceptionally bright. He landed a job as a scientist at Star Labs in Gotham. After no plastic surgeon could help him, Preston turned to Matt Hagen, knowing about his Clayface condition. He would visit Hagen at prison to learn everything he could. He would extract some of Hagen's blood and isolate the part of it that made him malleable. After he injected himself with it, he went out on the town as a handsome new man. However, his face began to melt like a wax candle, and when he grabbed his date, when she tried to run off, the contagion affecting his body went into hers, melting her into a gross puddle of protoplasm. Preston doesn't want to hurt anybody. They just so happen to stand in his way of curing himself. He wears an armored exoskeleton with super strength to contain his infection, but after a while it will cause a fever inside his body that will kill him unless he transfers it into someone else. He's forced to end life in order to prolong his own. Devastating. His hideout is a condemned wax museum in the slums of Gotham that the local school kids believe is haunted, which is just perfect. He also has a beautiful blonde assistant named Helena who turns out to be one of the wax mannequins. The museum burns to the ground at the end of the story, with Preston running back inside to certain doom to save her. How noble! He and Helena would survive and return in future stories, one of which being the 4-part Mud Pack I'm sure I'll get to someday soon. Clayface 3 is a villain you sympathize with because of his immense loneliness. His motivation to fix his ailment is justified and understandable. Having to kill people in the most horrific way imaginable is, well, less than ideal. After being attacked by the ghost of Hugo Strange posing as that hitchhiker, Boss Thorne had been picked up by the Ohio State Patrol. Terrified, he confessed to every crime he had ever committed, and, deemed insane, he would be incarcerated at Arkham Asylum. When he got out, Thorne would learn Bruce Wayne was Batman through photos of him changing into costume taken by Vicky Vale, and hired Deadshot to eliminate him in Detective Comics number 518. It failed, and Thorne believed the photos he had received were a trick, thus forgetting all about Wayne being the Bat. Thorne's ghastly visions of Strange wouldn't cease. In fact, they'd get worse. He'd hear knocks at the door in Detective Comics number 520 to find the corpse of Hugo standing in his doorway, dressed as Batman. Remember, Thorne had a reason to believe Hugo was the Dark Knight because he had given his life to keep the hero's identity secret. Thorne shows his true colors, sniveling like a coward, and apologizes for Strange's murder, saying it was an accident. His tormentor would once again vanish. Thorne would employ a psychiatrist and paranormal investigator named Dr. 13, who also goes by the name of Ghostbreaker, to rid him of this vengeful spirit. Dr. 13 would go check out the condemned Grey Towers building, and in its inner labs, he and Thorne encounter what appears to be another ghost of Strange, only for it to be revealed as a hologram being projected through hidden square prisms in the room. Dr. 13 suspects more prisms and projectors have been scattered all over Thorne's home, along with recorded tapes of Strange's voice. Thorne would believe his own men were playing tricks on him and retaliates, killing one of them at City Hall to the delight of Hugo Strange, who watches on in his limousine across the street. Professor Strange would make his full return in Batman number 356 from 1983. After a night out with Vicky Vale, Bruce would find himself mysteriously transported home after suddenly falling asleep behind the wheel of his car. All seems normal until Alfred comes at him with a knife. Bruce knocks him out, and when he turns to look at him again, he finds Alfred on his feet and carrying some tea, as if nothing happened. While showering, Bruce is then attacked by Robin. Kind of a weird place to do that. During the fight, Bruce picks Dick up and throws him into the glass door of the shower stall, and believes he's killed him. Later, as he's walking down the stairs, Bruce is attacked again by Dick. After the young man tumbles down the stairs, Bruce realizes he's a robot. He enters the Batcave to find Hugo Strange waiting for him, with a spare batsuit for Bruce to put on. Strange had shaved his beard to look more like Bruce, drugged him, and brought him to this phony Wayne Manor, filled with androids of Alfred and Dick Grayson. He reveals he had survived his beating at the hands of Thorne's men with advanced yoga techniques that slowed his heartbeat to an undetectable level. Because of the great lengths he had gone to fake his own death, Hugo thinks the best course of action is to kill Batman and completely replace him. Strange's madness here actually gives him the upper hand against Batman. Bruce still wasn't at 100% either because of the drugs in his system. Batman doesn't understand why Strange is so obsessed with him, but it's always been about respect and ego. Strange knows Batman is the greatest there is. His scheming has been a way to test himself against him, see how well he measures up to the Dark Knight, and if he's ready to take that mantle away from him. Hugo has become so delusional, though, that he already thinks he is Batman. After Robin arrives and interferes, Strange knows he has been defeated and, having rigged the mansion with explosives, detonates them, saying if he can't be Batman, no one can. Now he's just speaking like a child. I wanna be Batman, no, I wanna. The Caped Crusaders survive the blast, but Strange's body is not recovered. In the 10th Batman Annual, we learn that the Strange that died in the explosion was just another one of his androids. Strange would intimidate shareholders of the Wayne Foundation into selling their stock and bankrupting the company. Wayne Manor is repossessed, and Bruce becomes homeless. It's weird seeing Batman carrying a hobo sack, dragging a dirty mattress he found in an alley, and wondering why he doesn't have a spoon in his utility belt to eat the canned food he could scrounge up. It'd be sad if he had to use a batarang to scoop it out. Batman had also been impersonated by someone who was out committing crimes in costume, revealed to be another android. When Batman crashed the duplicate Batcycle it was riding on by yanking on the handlebars with a rope batarang. The real Hugo Strange would infiltrate the Batcave and steal the Batmobile, forcing Batman and Robin to pursue it from above in the Batcopter. Hugo loses control of the vehicle and crashes it into a cliffside. When Commissioner Gordon arrives at the scene, Batman tells him that he had hypnotized Strange into believing he was Bruce Wayne to protect his real identity. He also tells the GCPD to test Strange's blood to make sure he's the real deal this time. Strange is imprisoned and raves about Bruce Wayne being Batman. No one believes him, though, and it gets to the point that he starts doubting it as well. He thinks maybe Batman duped him all this time, wanted him to think he was Wayne when he's really someone else. This has definitely made for one of the weirdest and most disjointed comic book reviews I've ever done for my channel. I kinda figured it would be, though. The title I'm giving it is Strange Apparitions because that's the story that kicked things off, but it's really a recap and analysis of the entirety of Hugo Strange's comic book appearances throughout the Bronze Age of Batman. Strange Apparitions by itself may feel like a partial story, inconclusive, and to some, maybe even a bit underwhelming. I think you need to immediately follow it up with a few more issues of Detective Comics and Batman to really get the full picture of what's going on. But the story is still well written, has a lot of great characters and memorable moments, and was the first to put the villain of Hugo Strange on the map. It's what brought him back from the dead, both literally and figuratively. He went from obscurity to becoming one of the Dark Knight's most valued rogues in the span of a few short years, the late 70s into the early 80s. I'm not saying he never would have gained prominence if not for Strange Apparitions, but much like Deadshot I mentioned earlier, his trajectory would have been a lot different. He wouldn't have appeared in other media forms when and where he did, so the character owes a lot to this story, to writer Steve Englehart for choosing to resurrect him nearly 40 years after his initial debut. Crazy. Figuring out Batman's secret identity instantly made Hugo Strange stand out. I've always viewed him as an equal to Batman in a lot of ways. In terms of raw intelligence, Strange has got to be one of the smartest enemies the Dark Knight has ever faced. He's usually several steps ahead of the hero, and he's got that dash of insane unpredictability to keep things interesting. He's one of the best comic book villains that fit the mold of that classic mad scientist archetype. In the future, I plan on reviewing some other more straightforward Hugo Strange stories, like Batman and the Monster Men from 2006, essentially a retelling of the villain's debut story, and Prey from the early 1990s. I have no clue exactly when I'll be able to get to them though. All I can say is stay tuned. Thank you for watching my video this week. I hope you enjoyed yourself. If you'd like to show your support to the channel and ensure the production of more videos like this one, subscribe, hit that like button, share my content to anyone you see fit, and become a producer on Patreon if you can, to help nominate future video topics. I will see you all next time. Take care, and always stay nerdy.